There's promise of adventure in the wild, but there's also danger. A lost hiker's desperate final messages, a solo adventurer's fatal journey, a run on a well-known trail. Each met a cruel fate in nature's grasp. Join us as we explore some of the most haunting and tragic deaths in the history of outdoor adventures. It was the 2nd of August, 2023, and Dr. Dave Hogbin and his family were nearing the end of their month-long caravanning trip. Dave, his wife Jane, and their 3 young sons had spent that month exploring far north Queensland and its stunning wilderness. That day they were visiting Crocodile Bend, a well-known area along the Annan River near Cooktown. The river was home to large saltwater crocodiles, yet it was also a popular spot for tourists. The family had been walking along an established path on a riverbank, enjoying an ordinary afternoon. There was no sign of the tragedy that was about to unfold. Dr. Dave Hogbin, a devoted father and respected general practitioner, was known for his compassion, intelligence, and love for adventure. At 40 years old, he had built a life dedicated to his family and medical profession, working alongside his wife Jane at a clinic in Newcastle, New South Wales. He found joy in the outdoors, frequently taking his wife and 3 young sons on camping trips and carefully planning each journey. On August 2nd, as Dave walked along the 16-foot-high riverbank, a portion of the path suddenly collapsed beneath him. In an instant, he lost his footing and plunged into the murky waters below. The dense tropical terrain, coupled with the steep and slippery riverbank, made it nearly impossible for him to climb back out, even though Dave was a tall, athletic man. Jane, who had been walking nearby, heard the splash and rushed to the edge. Seeing her husband struggling, she immediately slid down, desperate to pull him from the water. Jane managed to grab Dave's arm, straining to pull him to safety. But the bank was unsafe, and she too began slipping toward the water. Realizing she was in danger of falling in with him, Dave made a devastating decision. He let go of her arm. Within seconds, a massive crocodile surfaced and dragged him under. The horrifying attack happened in an instant. Jane, still clinging to the unstable bank, was helpless as her husband disappeared beneath the water. She screamed for help, but there was nothing anyone could do. Their children, thankfully, did not witness the attack directly. Their aunt and uncle shielded them from the unfolding nightmare. Despite immediate efforts to search for Dave, the Annan River was unyielding. For the next few days, Queensland authorities launched an extensive operation, scouring the river for any sign of Dave. Rangers soon located a 16-foot crocodile in a nearby creek, recognizable by a distinctive scar on its snout. The animal was euthanized, and upon examination, human remains were found inside. Though the remains were yet to be formally identified, authorities strongly believed they belonged to Dave. Further tests would confirm this in the days to come. The loss of Dave Hogbin deeply affected his family, friends, and the wider community. His colleagues at Jules Medical Center described him as compassionate and selfless, a man who always put others before himself. Jane later spoke of her husband's final moments with profound grief and admiration. She recalled his final warning, telling her she was falling in too. His ultimate decision, though heartbreaking, had saved her life. She walked away unharmed that day, but at a devastating cost. A GoFundMe campaign, initially set up to assist Jane and her children, quickly raised over $160,000. The generosity of friends, patients, and strangers alike allowed Jane the time and financial freedom to grieve and support her young sons as they navigated life without their father. Authorities suspended the search for further remains, and a report for the coroner was prepared. Dave had not been fishing or engaging in reckless behavior. He had simply been walking with his family when the ground beneath him gave way. On August 5, 2023, 37-year-old Rachel Moran, a mother of 5, set out for a routine jog on the Ma and Pa Trail in Harford County, Maryland. But this time, she never returned. The discovery of her body the following day sent shockwaves through the community and ignited a nationwide search for the person responsible for her brutal death. Rachel was the heart of her family and a source of light for those around her. Described by loved ones as the life of the party, she had an infectious energy and a natural ability to make people laugh. She was passionate about fashion, marathons, and living each day to the fullest. Friends and family knew her as someone who spread joy wherever she went. On August 5th, Rachel decided to go for a run along the Ma and Pa Trail, a well-known path frequented by hikers and runners. It was a familiar route for her, one she had taken many times before. She arrived at the trailhead on William Street around 6 p.m., parked her car and set off on what should have been an uneventful jog. But hours passed and Rachel never returned home. Her absence was alarming. By 11:20 p.m., her boyfriend, Richard Tobin, reported her missing. The search for her began immediately, with friends, family, volunteers, and law enforcement scouring the trail for any sign of her. The search continued the following day. Around 1 p.m. on August 6, 2023, a disturbing discovery was made. Rachel's body was found off the trail, approximately 70 to 80 feet from the path. The gruesome nature of the scene left no doubt that she had met a violent end. Reports later revealed that Rachel had suffered severe head trauma, with injuries so brutal that an open casket funeral was not possible. A blood trail stretching suggested she had been attacked and dragged into the secluded area where she was found. Investigators determined that she had been targeted and subjected to a level of violence that shocked even seasoned officers. From the moment her body was discovered, law enforcement treated the case as a homicide. The Harford County Sheriff's Office launched an extensive investigation, urging the public to come forward with any information. Hundreds of tips flooded in within the first week, but the identity of the person responsible remained unknown. The case gained national attention as authorities worked tirelessly to track down the suspect. Surveillance footage, forensic analysis, and witness statements all played a role in piecing together what had happened. Then a breakthrough came. The deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA evidence recovered from Rachel's body matched DNA found at the scene of a home invasion and assault that had taken place in Los Angeles months earlier. This revelation led investigators to a name, Victor Martinez Hernandez, a 23-year-old from El Salvador. He had illegally entered the United States multiple times, evading authorities despite an arrest warrant in his home country for the murder of another woman. On June 14, 2024, after a relentless 10-month manhunt, law enforcement tracked Martinez Hernandez to Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was found at a bar, where officers took him into custody. Even then, he attempted to lie about his identity, but the evidence against him was undeniable. He was extradited to Maryland, where he now faces charges for Rachel's death. Rachel's death left a lasting impact on her family, the Harford County community, and beyond. Her mother, Patty Morin, expressed a bittersweet sense of relief upon the suspect's capture, acknowledging that while justice was finally in motion, it did not lessen the pain of losing her daughter. County officials announced plans to install advanced surveillance cameras along the Ma and Pa Trail to enhance safety for runners and hikers. The case also reignited national debates on border security and crime, given the suspect's history of illegal entry into the United States and previous violent offenses. As the case proceeds through the courts, Rachel's loved ones continue to mourn her absence while holding on to the hope that accountability will bring some measure of closure. In April 1994, 45-year-old Sheck Exley was widely regarded as one of the most accomplished cave divers in the world. A mathematics teacher by profession, he devoted his life to cave exploration, setting groundbreaking records in extreme depth diving. But not even his vast experience could save him on his last dive, an attempt to reach the bottom of Zacaton, a deep freshwater sinkhole in northeastern Mexico, believed to be the world's deepest of its kind. What happened in those depths remains one of the great mysteries of deep diving. By the age of 23, Sheck had logged over 1,000 cave dives, a number that would surpass 4,000 by the end of his career. His books became essential reading for divers worldwide, laying the groundwork for modern cave diving safety protocols. Exley was also a member of the International Explorers Club and worked on projects with National Geographic and the National Geodetic Survey. His contributions extended beyond diving, aiding in the retrieval of over 40 bodies from underwater caves, earning him the honorary title of Sheriff from the Florida Sheriff's Association. On April 6, 1994, the day of his final dive, Exley was diving alongside Jim Bowden. Their plan was simple but extreme. Both divers would descend independently along separate weighted guidelines, using similar techniques. The sinkhole, stretching over 1,080 feet deep, was largely unexplored. If successful, Exley would set a new world depth record. At the start, everything proceeded as expected. Bowden, beginning his descent just ahead of Exley, closely monitored his gas supply. Around 874 feet, he realized his consumption was higher than anticipated. Recognizing the risk, Bowden made the difficult decision to abort his dive at 898 feet, initiating his long decompression ascent. Exley, however, continued downward. 18 minutes into the dive, the support team at the surface noticed something alarming. The steady trail of bubbles from Exley's line had vanished. Bowden, enduring more than 9 hours of decompression, observed Exley's unused decompression tank still attached to the line. He knew what this meant. Exley had not survived. The day after the dive, team members returned to recover equipment. Exley's guideline, weighed down by his staged steel tanks, remained taut in the water. A recovery operation was planned, and 2 days later, as they pulled up the line, Exley's body surfaced. What they found left more questions than answers. His body was entangled in the guideline, wrapped several times around both arms and the valves of his side-mounted tanks. His mask remained in place, and all his equipment was intact. The line had not entangled his back-mounted bottles, mounting plate, or buoyancy compensator, ruling out an uncontrolled freefall. His wrist-mounted dive computer recorded a maximum depth of 906 feet, far short of his intended goal of 1,000 feet. The cause of Exley's death was never definitively determined. Some experts suggested high-pressure nervous syndrome, a condition that can cause tremors, cognitive impairment, and blackouts at extreme depths. The narcotic effects of nitrogen at that level could have worsened his condition, impairing his judgment or motor control. Others speculated that Exley had deliberately wrapped himself in the line, possibly recognizing he would not survive and preventing a dangerous body recovery operation. Most likely, he had run low on his bottom gas, lost control of his buoyancy, and became unable to ascend. Exley's death sent shockwaves through the diving community. He had been considered nearly invincible, a diver who had survived countless extreme conditions and pioneered safe techniques. A memorial service was held at Ortega United Methodist Church in Jacksonville, his hometown. Tributes poured in from fellow divers, students, and explorers who had admired his contributions to the sport and science of cave diving. To many, he was the granddaddy of cave diving, a man whose expertise had shaped the field. For those who had followed his career, there was grim poetry in the way he died. He had always pushed the boundaries of what was possible underwater, and he died doing exactly what he loved most. His legacy lives on in the safety protocols he helped establish, the divers he inspired, and the vast, uncharted depths he dared to explore. On November 13, 2015, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Worsley set out on an ambitious journey that few had dared to attempt. The 55-year-old British explorer, a seasoned veteran of polar expeditions, aimed to become the first person in history to cross Antarctica solo, unaided and unsupported. His journey was inspired by his lifelong hero, Sir Ernest Shackleton, whose own Antarctic crossing had remained unfinished a century earlier. Determined to honor Shackleton's legacy, Henry embarked on a grueling 80-day trek across the icy continent, pulling a 150-kilogram sled with all his supplies. Born on October 4, 1960, Henry had spent 36 years in the British Army before dedicating himself to polar exploration. He had previously led successful expeditions retracing the routes of legendary explorers, including Shackleton and Roald Amundsen. His passion for Antarctica was deeply personal, tied to his admiration for the early 20th century explorers who had ventured into the unknown. More than just a test of endurance, this final journey was a tribute to them, a mission to push the limits of human resilience while raising funds for the Endeavor Fund, which supports wounded servicemen and women. On November 13, 2015, Henry arrived at his starting point on Berkner Island. From the outset, the expedition proved to be more difficult than anticipated. The Antarctic terrain was unforgiving, with multiple whiteouts hindering his efforts. Every step required immense strain as he dragged his sled across the barren landscape. Unlike previous explorers who had used kites or dogs for assistance, Henry relied solely on his strength. But Henry pressed on, and days turned into weeks. His body began to wither under the extreme conditions, the sheer physical toll of the journey becoming more apparent with each passing mile. By mid-January, after 69 days and an astonishing 913 miles covered, he was close to his goal. Only 30 miles remained to the finish line, the Ross Ice Shelf. But on the 70th day, Henry could go no further. Exhausted and severely dehydrated, he remained in his tent for 2 days, hoping his strength would return. When it became clear that his body had reached its limit, he made the painful decision to call for help. A rescue team arrived, airlifting him to Union Glacier Base Camp before transferring him to Clínica Magallanes in Punta Arenas, Chile. At first it was believed he was suffering from dehydration and malnutrition, but tests soon revealed a more severe issue: bacterial peritonitis, an infection of the abdominal lining. The condition, often fatal if not treated quickly, had already begun shutting down his organs. Despite undergoing surgery, Henry's body had endured too much. On January 24, 2016, just 1 day after being evacuated, he died of complete organ failure. The man who had pushed himself beyond human limits in pursuit of a dream was gone at 55 years old. Tributes poured in from around the world. Prince William, who had been a patron of Henry's expedition, expressed his grief, calling him a man who showed great courage and determination. The prince and his brother, Prince Harry, vowed to support Henry's widow, Joanna, and their 2 children, Max and Alicia. Fellow explorers spoke of the extreme hardships he had endured. Polar expert Penn Haddow described Henry's challenge as possibly the hardest form of travel on the surface of the earth. Bear Grylls called him one of the strongest men and bravest soldiers. The Army, where he had spent most of his life, mourned the loss of a dedicated officer and an inspiring leader. Beyond the tributes, Henry's legacy endured in more tangible ways. His expedition had raised more than £100,000 for the Endeavour Fund, supporting injured servicemen and women, an achievement he had been deeply proud of. In 2017, he was posthumously awarded the Polar Medal for his contributions to Antarctic exploration. Later that year, his family traveled to South Georgia Island, a place he had loved, to inter his ashes near the grave of Shackleton, the man whose legacy had inspired his own. On April 23, 2013, 66-year-old Geraldine Largay set out on the adventure of a lifetime, determined to conquer the Appalachian Trail. But what was meant to be a triumphant personal achievement turned into a devastating ordeal. Geraldine, known to her loved ones as Jerry, embarked on a journey she would never return from. Jerry was a retired Air Force nurse from Brentwood, Tennessee, and a woman full of warmth and spirit. She had a zest for life, an infectious optimism, and a deep love for adventure. Hiking the Appalachian Trail was a personal goal. Her husband George supported her along the way, meeting her at various checkpoints for brief reunions and resupply stops. Though she had experience with long-distance hikes, she was not a seasoned survivalist. She relied on preparation, maps, and the kindness of fellow hikers. In the summer of 2013, Jerry's hiking partner had to leave due to a family emergency. Instead of abandoning the hike, Jerry decided to press on alone. By late July, she had reached the final stretch of her journey, only a few weeks away from Maine's Mount Katahdin, her ultimate destination. On the morning of July 22nd, she walked past a lean-to shelter, her last confirmed sighting. Sometime after, she stepped off the trail and never found her way back. At 11 a.m. that morning, she tried to send a text to George, explaining that she was in trouble. She had left the trail to go to BR, gotten lost, and needed him to contact AMC to see if a trail maintainer could help her. She estimated she was somewhere north of Woods Road. The message never went through. She climbed to higher ground, hoping for a signal, and resent the text multiple times. The next day she tried again, stating that she had been lost since the previous day, was 3 or 4 miles off the trail, and needed the police for advice on what to do. But her phone had no service. As days passed, Jerry rationed her supplies and attempted to navigate her way out. She eventually found a clearing near the edge of a United States Navy-owned property and set up camp. She gathered branches and pine needles to keep her tent dry, tied a space blanket between trees for shelter, and attempted to signal for help. She tried to start fires, burning wood and brush in hopes that rescuers would see the smoke. But search teams, hampered by heavy rain in the dense Maine wilderness, never found her. At least 3 K-9 teams came within 100 yards of her campsite, but the thick trees concealed her location. She kept a journal documenting her struggle for survival. Days turned to weeks. In her entries, she expressed a final plea to whoever might one day find her remains, that they contact her husband George and her daughter Carrie. She wrote that it would be the greatest kindness for them to know of her death and the location where her body was found, regardless of how many years it might take. Jerry's final entry was dated August 18th, 26 days after she went missing. By then, she had succumbed to starvation and exposure, alone in the wilderness just 2 miles from the Appalachian Trail. For over 2 years, her fate remained a mystery. Search teams combed the area, following tips from hikers and analyzing every possible lead. George, though devastated, came to terms with the likelihood that his wife had perished in the vast wilderness she had loved so much. In October 2015, a forester working near the Navy property stumbled upon a flattened tent. Nearby, a human skull rested inside a sleeping bag. A green backpack, a journal covered in moss, and other personal belongings confirmed the identity of the remains. Jerry Largay had finally been found. A medical examiner ruled her cause of death as exposure. Her family, while heartbroken, expressed gratitude to those who had tirelessly searched for her. They placed a cross at the site where she spent her final days.